It is time for college football best bets presented by FanDuel. And it's a matchup between Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson that's getting closer.
Slowly
by the
back.
week. Here comes Danny off a great week in week 6. Goes 500, treads water. Well, Chip sinks a little bit. 7-10 last week as Danny and Chip go head-to-head against the spread. Also picking totals here on CBS Sports HQ. We are going to pick every single ranked game, and we have a couple of doozies in the SEC. We're going to start it off with Georgia and Texas. And Chip, it's the first time Georgia's been an underdog in 50 games.
Well, probably because they haven't been meeting performance. Chris, let's talk about meeting the odds makers' performance. How about Georgia having one of the worst cover percentages in the entire country? They are 1-5 against the spread, and that includes allowing Mississippi State to throw up how many points on that Georgia defense last week? Yikes. Texas, on the other hand, one of the best cover percentages in the entire country. The Longhorns are 5-1. They are covering the spread by more than a touchdown per game. This Longhorns team is college football's monster. We look around, we talk about parity, and there is no one in the country who looks more complete than Texas right now. I'm not going to wish cast better football from the Bulldogs when I can just simply place my bet with the team that has been delivering week in and week out. It doesn't matter the quarterback. It does not matter the opponent. This Texas team simply operates at a higher level than the opponent. I think that continues playing at home against Georgia, even on the big stage, even coming out of the Red River rivalry. Give me the Longhorns. Hook 'em.
Let me just check the notes here, because Texas has been awesome versus Louisiana Monroe. Mississippi State has been awful. Michigan even, who has been below expectations. And then, of course, Oklahoma on a backup quarterback without 5 wide receivers to play. So, yes, Texas has been awesome, but I would check a little bit on the competition. Meanwhile, Georgia, they looked bad last week against Mississippi State. Totally agree. Kirby Smart's out there shoving the opposing quarterback. I know it was unintentional, but I think that was the perfect game for Kirby Smart going into this one. Allows him to coach up his defense as hard as he's ever coached them, and not like they needed any super dialed in focus, more so because this game has been circled for so long. But I think you get Georgia's best. I think Texas wins, but I think much like some of the other outstanding games we've seen, think about last week when you have ranked on ranked, top 10 on top 10, comes down to the wire, field goal type game. So give me Georgia and those 3.5 points. I think Texas probably wins, but I think this one's coming down to the wire.
If Georgia does win, that would mean no more unbeatens in the SEC. It would be the earliest that's happened since 2007. The other huge game in the SEC featuring a couple teams, Danny, that have had similar fortnights, I guess, if I could borrow a word from across the pond, because you have Alabama going to Tennessee. 2 weeks ago, each of those teams lost as a favorite. Last week, each of those teams barely got by as a favorite.
Yes. This one is, I think, teams that have been below what we thought they would be coming into the season. And maybe that's more about the expectations that were off the charts for a young quarterback in Nico Iamaleava, and then for what we've seen from Jalen Milroe coming in there as the Heisman favorite. And then he has the outstanding game. And it really hasn't been him, but me, it's about the defense for Alabama. That's why I actually like Tennessee with the points and probably to win the game outright, because Tennessee's offense has not been great, but their defense has been great. And I think they're good enough to slow down Jalen Milroe, an offense which was held pretty much in check against South Carolina. And Nico, against this defense, who would have ever thought you would have needed to see Bama's defense to get right? I think that's just what the doctor ordered for Tennessee. I don't think there's fireworks galore, but I think there's enough offense for Tennessee to get it done in Neyland Stadium. I think it's a lower scoring game, so I'll take the under as well, but I like the Vols here.
When we got rid of divisions, who would have thought the takeaway would be that Alabama can't handle the SEC East? That whether it's Vanderbilt or South Carolina or now Tennessee, that the SEC East is more like the SEC Beast when it comes to the Crimson Tide. I'm right there with you, Danny. I think that Alabama's defense is going to be the one spot where we get to see Tennessee open things up a little bit, where we get to see Tennessee be able to find a little bit of a rhythm. The statistical profile for this Vols team has the the weakness on the offensive side, and that's where no one thought we would be at this point in the season. But to go back and look at the tape of Tennessee's offense, now I don't think that there is a correct narrative that Josh Heupel has lost his fastball or that Tennessee all of a sudden has lost its advantage. I see a Tennessee team that is a dropped pass, an overthrow, a missed block. Like these smallest corrections, all coachable corrections, can create those explosive plays that really allow Tennessee's offense to go. And I think that going up against an Alabama defense that really has been giving up those explosive plays, I think the Vols find them, especially at home. Give me Tennessee to win the game. I'll take the points.
Are the goalposts going in the water again if that happens?
I don't know. I mean, I think they've already down there. Yeah, you got to act like you've been there.
The last 2 times Bama's gone to the state of Tennessee, that's happened. Of course, a couple of weeks ago in Nashville and a couple of years ago in Knoxville. CBS 3:30 Eastern Time. We have a ranked matchup in the Big Ten. It's Michigan, a 3.5-point favorite at an Illinois team, Chip, that I feel like the wrong team's favored here, and it's all on brand. What do you think?
Listen, that's the way the market, right? The number is not telling you the exact projected score. They're trying to figure out what the market is. And the simple-minded college football fan cannot comprehend that Illinois should be the favorite, but I think that Illinois should be the favorite, and I think Illinois is going to win this football game. And I think that one of the big surprises for me going into this season is that Michigan defense that still has certified first-round picks. I mean, whether you're talking about Will Johnson at corner, whether you're talking about Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, even Josiah Stewart coming off the edge. I mean, these are some of the top talents defensively in all of college football, but there is a little bit of weakness when we go to that defensive back 2, when we go to that defensive back 3. And what Luke Altmaier has been able to do that has made this Illinois passing attack so dangerous is that he does spread the ball around. You know, you've got Pat Bryant on one side, you've got Zach Franklin to make the catches underneath, go get some yards after catch. I think it is the diversity of passing options that Luke Altmaier has that can be able to give him an advantage, even against this stellar Michigan defense. I've got Illinois. I think that the wrong team's favored.
You know that statement when they say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none? What if you have 3 and you're on your 3rd and you're Michigan? Is that negative? I don't know what the math is on that, but that's what Michigan has done. They're going to the desperation move, the 3rd quarterback of the season in Jack Tuttle, the 25-year-old who hasn't played that much football. And I get that the offense looked a little bit better, but this to me is still an offense which is struggling to find an identity. Yes, I know what they want to be. It's Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards, but without any quarterback pass game, it has been diminished. And I think Illinois will be able to continue to do that. And what's really interesting is you mentioned it. I think they have the edge in the pass game with Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant on the outside, Luke Altmaier taking care of the football. I think they're able to score against this Michigan defense through the air. I don't know if they're able to throw the ball against them, but if they throw away from Will Johnson, I think that's where they have their success. I like Illinois too, and man, it's making me nervous because Tom Fornelli, our co-part on the Cover 3 podcast, he likes them too. We all love the Illini this week.
He's the only Illinois football fan I've ever met in my life. And I grew up on the border of Illinois in the city of Muscatine, Iowa.
Shots fired.
You guys know what's going on in this game on the broadcast, by the way?
No.
It's a 100-year anniversary of a Red Grange team that beat Michigan and had a great year. So they're doing throwbacks where they're wearing fake
the ugly
leather helmets.
Yeah, they're
Jenny
gross.
Dell is going to be on the sideline dressed as a flapper.
Oh, really?
I'm not kidding. She is. She was upstairs picking out her outfit
as a
earlier
flapper.
today. Yes. So, Chip, must-see TV in the Big Ten on CBS, 3:30 Eastern Time. Let's recap the picks and our best bets here. The guys liking Tennessee plus 2.5 against Alabama, and Illinois plus 3.5 at home against Michigan. More Big Ten to pick on the way, including Oregon coming off that huge victory at home against Ohio State. But they're one of those teams traveling across the country, multiple time zones. Is that going to affect them this week like it's affected so many other teams so far this Big Ten season? That's next. Continuing to pick college football games against the spread. A couple of Friday-ranked teams in action. Oregon's at Purdue. BYU's home against Oklahoma State. Really interesting game in the Big Ten Saturday at noon. Nebraska 5-1 at unbeaten Indiana. But let's start with those Friday games. Chris Hassel, Danny Kanell in studio. Chip Patterson is here as well. When you're a Big Ten team in conference play and you're traveling multiple time zones, I know Tom Fornelli's talked a lot about this, but you're 3-9-1 against the spread right now. Oregon is a 4-touchdown favorite at Purdue, Danny.
Yeah, this game scares me, especially because I'm going to go ahead and lay the points with Oregon. They are traveling, short week. Purdue's coming off a performance where they, took Illinois right to the brink and tried the 2-point conversion and came up just short. But I also think they also showed their cards with Ryan Brown, their quarterback who filled in for Hudson Card, running the football. I think now that that's on tape, Oregon will be able to keep that in check. And there's one other aspect to this. Dillon Gabriel all of a sudden has vaulted himself into second in the Heisman Trophy conversation. Maybe that comes into play for Will Stein to keep him in just a little bit longer, to get him a little bit more stats. And that being the case, I think Oregon gets it done and covers the 27.5 points.
This has nothing to do with time zones, Chris. This has to do with something that goes back through multiple coaches, through multiple generations, and that is top 5 teams going to play Purdue in West Lafayette. Now, I'm not calling the straight out upset. I'm just saying 27 is a heck of a lot of points for a spot on a short week after a massive win, going up against a Purdue team that I think with that quarterback run game might be able to shorten this thing. We saw Oregon get up early and pack it in against Michigan State. This is a team that likes to be able to handle its business and then maybe just make sure that we get out of the game as healthy as possible. And there's no shame in that. They are clearly one of the best teams in the entire country. It's just 27.5 is a whole heck of a lot of points when we consider the short week, the hangover, and again, the juju of the spoiler makers.
Yeah, especially against number 2 teams. It was 3 years ago. They beat number 2 Iowa, and back in 2018 beat number 2 Ohio State. And you're getting all those points. Chip's going to take them. Also on Friday, it's unbeaten BYU at home against an Oklahoma State team, Danny, that's off to their worst conference start since Mike Gundy's first season. They haven't won a game yet in conference play.
It's been abysmal, and thank goodness Mike Gundy is okay after any concussion protocol. Did you know about this?
Yeah, he got hit by a cow,
Yeah,
right?
he headbutted one of his own cows, but he is okay. He will be on the sidelines. I am going to take Oklahoma State here, and it's really more about the conference as a whole. The Big 12 we were sold on was going to be this conference of parity and entertainment and close one-score games. And as bad as Oklahoma State has been, I do think they are still going to go out there and put up a pretty good fight for Mike Gundy and for that squad. And Jake Retzlaff has been the story of maybe all of college football outside him or Diego Pavia for Vanderbilt, the BY Jew, as he calls himself, which is such an unlikely story. And he's been playing awesome for BYU. And I know they're coming off a big win against Arizona, but I think this game is inside that number. It's just too big. BYU wins, but more close to a touchdown.
BYU's defense has been excellent this year, but I'm looking at Oklahoma State coming out of the off week to have one of its sharpest games offensively. I'm also going back to this matchup just last year. It went into overtime, 34-34. Oklahoma State wins the game 40-34. I think that what we've got here is a total that is respectful of what BYU has done defensively and acknowledging Oklahoma State's offensive struggles. Just seems just a little too low for a game. Provo at night kind of feels like it's going to get a little wild, get a little weird. I'm going to go over the total in this one.
Okay, so we get a ranked Big 12 team, a ranked Big 10 team, both of those teams unbeaten, both of those games on Friday. Let's move to Saturday, early slate. Miami is back in action, and this is it could be a tricky spot. Could be a tricky spot here. 4.5-point favorites at Louisville. Chip, look, I was looking at the totals and how Miami's been doing scoring points this season. They're unbeaten going over this season.
Yeah, we ain't stopping now, Chris, because the real magic to Miami overs is not something that any Miami fan wants to hear. It's the fact that this Miami defense has been underperforming. I mean, they've got great individuals that can get after the passer, but really the secondary has been taken advantage of. They've given up a lot of explosive plays, and they've given up explosive plays to anyone that's good. And I do think that Louisville's offense, led by Tyler Shuck, categorizes as a good quarterback who can take advantage of a leaky defense. Now, on the other side of that is the part that Miami fans love to hear and love to think about, which is that Cam Ward is the most dynamic quarterback that they've had in a generation. And so I think that we are going to have a game between these two quarterbacks where both of them shine, where it is a little bit of a back and forth. And so, yeah, I find myself again looking at the defenses and seeing both of them struggling to get stops. And so my best bet here is to go over the total.
Chris, you mentioned it. It's a tricky spot. It's a noon kickoff when you're on the road against a team that has a couple rough losses that desperately needs that signature win on the season in Louisville. I think one of these teams is better than their record says they are, and one that maybe is not as good as their record says they are. And I would never apologize for winning, but Miami has been sloppy their last couple of games. Virginia Tech at home comes down to controversial play call, Hail Mary, non-catch at the end of that game. Then there was a controversial targeting call at the end of the Cal game that helped propel them to that win. But in any case, they've been very tight games. I think once again, this is a tight game. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami gets it done. Cam Ward is so special in those clutch situations that I could see him bringing this team from behind. But Tyler Shuck is just as good, maybe not quite as good, but he's a really good, capable quarterback who can put up points on this team, just like Chip said. I think this game comes down to a field goal, so I'll take Louisville at home.
And maybe Louisville saved the season last week when they came from behind late to save one against Virginia. That Virginia team has to play Clemson now. This is in Death Valley. Tony Elliott won a couple of national championships with Clemson, first time facing his former team, Danny.
Clemson's really good. I'll just put it at that. And this is more about Clemson than it is about Virginia. But I feel like Clemson is on this sort of mission to prove to everyone that crushed them after they lost to Georgia and criticized Cade Klubnik, including myself. He looked like a deer in the headlights in that second half, looked overwhelmed. And then the other people were crushing Dabo Swinney for the lack of hitting the transfer portal. And since that game, it has lit a fire under them, and they have been absolutely unstoppable. I think that's going to happen again. Virginia has been really a great story in the ACC, but I think Clemson is just a cut above in the conference, so I'll say Clemson gets it done and covers.
Unquestionably, Danny. This is a Clemson team that I like the way that they handle their business. They go up against Wake Forest on the road last week. Wake comes out there with the scoring drive early, and Clemson just says, you're not going to do that again. Couple interceptions. They flip them into quick touchdowns. The game's over by halftime. I think that we see something similar, and this is going to be a spot where for the second week in a row, I'm going to be going to the Clemson first half line. Clemson first half minus 11.5. We're looking at basically getting a 21-7 or better type score going into the locker room. We don't have to worry about whether or not Dabo's going to try to run it up on his former assistant. We don't have to worry about whether or not all the Sweeneys and Herb Streets and Venables that come into the game in the fourth quarter, whether they're going to allow any touchdowns for the back door. So yeah, I'm going to take Clemson in the first half, because when it comes to those starters, that top end talent, the Tigers are right up there with legitimately anybody in the country, and they're playing that way right now.
I think Chip would be a good offensive coordinator, because you find something that works, you keep playing it until they show they can stop it. Don't get cute, just play the same damn thing. And he's doing it again, first half Clemson. Look, we got some incredible matchups this week, 2 of them in the SEC, but this Nebraska-Indiana game is really intriguing to me. I'm so excited to see Nebraska go on the road to an Indiana team that hasn't really faced anybody yet.
Yeah, it's been such a great story. Indiana going 6-0, first time they've been in this spot since the 1960s, and Curt Cignetti's brought a swagger into Bloomington that I don't think we ever imagined we would see on the football field, but yet that's what he's done. And Curtis Work has been really solid playing quarterback, but as good as they've been, this will be by far their biggest challenge in the trenches. Nebraska's defensive line will be the best they've faced, and I think this will be the best offensive line they've faced as well. That being said, I think this is a close game. I really like Dylan Raiola, too, on the other side of the ball, as he has been playing exceptionally well as a true freshman. The only other spot that was a little bit tough for him was on the road. I think that could be the case again, but I'm going to go ahead and take those 6.5 points. Indiana's first test, we've already seen Nebraska tested a couple times. I'm going to say Indiana wins, but Nebraska covers.
Sneakily, Indiana has been tested. They just responded with so much thunder that the final score doesn't show how close the game was. Right? I mean, Maryland kind of had them in a back and forth, and then boom, hit the gas.
No,
Northwestern had them in a little back and forth.
No good.
Boom, hit the gas. Indiana has had competitive juices flowing. They haven't just been cruising. They have had to come up with answers, and they have come up with answers before. I am so impressed with the way that Indiana handles its business, the ruthlessness that Curt Cignetti brings to the way he coaches and the way he gets this team ready to go. I think this is a game where you're going to have to score a whole bunch of points, and I think Indiana is absolutely ready to go and do it. So that's why I've got myself a DK 2-for-1 special. Give me
Jeez.
Indiana to cover and give me the over on the total.
Chip, you have Indiana making the playoff?
Not making the playoff, but I've got them as one of the first 2 teams out.
Okay. Chipalytics here going with IU at home against Nebraska, thinking they might inch closer to having some incredibly big games on their home turf later on this season. Coming up, we've got Army and Navy ranked for the first time at the same time since 1960. But one of our guys is fading one of them this week. Both hosting unranked teams as big favorites. All right, let's pick some more college football games. Number 19, Missouri's at home against Auburn. Only a 5.5-point favorite there. How about the story? Army and Navy ranked in the same poll, same week, first time since 1960. And Notre Dame at Georgia Tech, versus Georgia Tech, I should say. Where's that game at, Danny?
Which one?
Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. Is that not in Atlanta at Georgia Tech? It said versus.
It's in
Georgia
the Big
Tech.
Body Benz.
It's in the Benz?
It is in the Benz.
Oh, every game's in the Benz. Georgia Tech and Georgia are going to play in Mercedes-Benz in a rivalry game coming up. What's up with that? We'll get to that in a second. Let's start with Auburn at Missouri. Columbia, Missouri here. And this is a strange line to me, Danny. Only 5.5.
It is, which does make me a little bit nervous because it tells the odds makers might know something that I've been telling you, that Missouri plays really well against bad teams. That's why I had the nice win against UMass last week. They covered, and they struggle against the better teams. Here's why I'm going to back Missouri, though. I still don't trust Auburn's offense. And I know Peyton Thorne has been a little bit better, but I think this game will come down to Missouri being able to get it done. The thing that's been concerning about me for Missouri is where has Luther Burden been? And I think they've been a little bit too reliant on him. Going back to him, Brady Cook has regressed as a passer, but I don't trust Auburn enough to get this done and keep it inside the number. I think Missouri wins by a touchdown, and I think in large part because their defense slows down Auburn's offense. So I also like the under here, but I like Missouri to win in a tight game.
Burden did have that shoulder injury last week, Chip, but he appears on track to play.
Yeah, even when he's been in the game and healthy, this Missouri offense has not looked right against power conference talent. I mean, it has been, that double-edged sword. Missouri's offense is a lot worse than we thought. Missouri's defense has been playing pretty well. I think that Auburn will be able to hold up for a little bit against the Tigers, which is why I'm actually, for my best bet, going to be targeting the first half under 26.5, maybe over the course of 4 quarters. If Auburn's offense isn't able to generate enough, the dam breaks, and we get to see some of those explosive plays, whether they do come from Luther Burden or Theo Weiss. Maybe they get it through the run game with Nate Noel. But this is a spot where I think it could be a sleepy, defensive-led start for both teams. So first half under will be the way that I'm going to attack this one.
Okay, let's move to number 23, Army, longest active win streak in the country, 10 straight. At home, Danny, against ECU.
Did you guys, I don't know if you guys happened to see the locker room after the game when they went 6-0 and they had like some high-ranking Army official in the locker room. Like, I'm talking like, I don't know if it was a 5-star general or what, but he was up there and he was hyping him up, and he said, we have the most versatile, mobile, and powerful front lines of anybody in the world. And he said, and you guys have the most versatile, powerful offensive line and defensive line of anybody in the country. It was an awesome scene. Army has been dominant from start to finish, one of the only teams in the country who has never trailed in a game. They have come out start to finish, and I think they do it again against East Carolina. I'm a believer in the Army Black Knights, so I'll go ahead and lay the 14.5.
Yeah, I think ECU's in trouble right here because what Army has done has been absolutely relentless. The way that they approach this, the way that they are executing their offense at a high level, I don't see the Pirates being able to stop it. And if we want to isolate one thing from recent history that will show you how this might go, the Charlotte 49ers moved it all up and down ECU to the tune of 55 points and a boatload of yards. I think Army's a better rushing attack than Charlotte, and so therefore I'll take the Army team total over 33.5.
It's a good segue to the Navy game because Navy is facing that Charlotte team, Danny, and you're actually going to ride with the 49ers.
I am. He mentioned the 55 points. They had a very tight game against Rice where they got the 1-point win. They're actually, I think they're better than than their record they are. They started off the season so rough. Biff Poggi was talking about the injuries they had, how they would hardly be able to field a team, and they've slowly been getting better and better. I think Navy wins the game, but I do think Charlotte, who has been somewhat of a cover king here as a double-digit underdog, I'm going to go ahead and back them in this game, but I do think Navy continues their undefeated run as well.
Dropping good segues and just building to my next take, Hassel. You know how we go. So if Charlotte has finally found a rhythm with its run game, that might be something that's going to help them out here. They might be able to score a few more points than we expect, but I absolutely do not expect that the 49ers will have the defensive stops necessary to keep Navy from being able to score. So instead of having to sweat what is kind of a tricky spread when we try to game out how this is going to end up playing out, I'm instead going to go with the thing I feel confident about, is that both Navy will be able to score, and Charlotte should be able to move the ball enough to contribute as well. I'll be going over the total.
Okay, let's move on to Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. Thanks to Chip, we know this game is at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This is an 11.5-point spread. Notre Dame, how do they always get away with not having to play like real road games?
I don't know. It's
when
the
they
brand.
Play like Navy, they'll play at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah.
They don't have to play on the road field all the time.
I mean, they have one of the most powerful alumni bases out there that do travel well, and they do, even the casuals will show up to watch Notre Dame, so maybe they can sell more tickets. That being said, I actually like the Yellow Jackets in this spot. As good as Notre Dame has been, and they've sort of corrected their issues, Riley Leonard had 3 touchdown passes last week. He's able to kind of find some semblance of a pass game for them against Stanford. I think Georgia Tech's offense is what keeps them in this game. Haynes King has quietly once again been that dude for the Yellow Jackets to put up some points for them at a massive shootout. Got a late cover against North Carolina last week for me. I'll go ahead and back them here. Notre Dame needs to win this game. I think they do. They have to stay in that playoff discussion after that loss to Northern Illinois. But I think Georgia Tech in Atlanta covers the number.
Notre Dame is losing defensive starters at an alarming rate. First, you lose your sack later, Traore, the week prior. Then we just find out this week that Benjamin Morrison, one of their top cornerbacks, is going to be out for the rest of the season after sustaining an injury. I mean, I know they've still got an excellent defense, and they are led by their defense. Great job keeping the clamps on Stanford, but we are dealing with a much different level of explosiveness, as you can see right here with this game-winning touchdown from Jamal Haynes. I think that Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, the wide receivers that they've got there, I think that Georgia Tech can score enough to be able to hang in this game. And so I am looking at a spot where the Yellow Jackets' explosiveness on offense makes them dangerous to cover, especially at 11.5. So I would agree, Danny. I'll take the underdogs here.
Only 3 true road games for Notre Dame this season. 3. Texas A&M, Purdue, and USC. That's it. They will have to play Army and Navy, but both of those neutral site games, MetLife and Yankee Stadium, is where those games are going to be taking place. When we come back, LSU coming off a monstrous home win, but now on the road in a rivalry game, less than a field goal favorite. What do the boys think? They got your picks next. All right, last set of games to pick against the spread in the top 25. Texas A&M's at Mississippi State. Really good one in the SEC in Fayetteville, Arkansas, as LSU comes to town. A couple of Big 12 matchups, and SMU in the ACC is hot on the road at Stanford. Let's start with A&M and Mississippi State. Danny, it's A&M's first game since blowing out Missouri. They are a 2-touchdown favorite here.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think Mississippi State here, coming off the game last week, everybody's looking, well, they did so well against Georgia. This is still a team that lost to Toledo, and I think getting Connor Wigman back really infused some life. And shockingly to me, I thought Marcel Reed was potentially the answer to this Texas A&M offense, but all of a sudden, Connor Wigman comes in, steps in. Last time we see him out, he looks spectacular. Another week of rest to get him even healthier, another week of comfort in that system, preparation. I think Texas A&M, that's rejuvenated this squad. So I'm going to say they win and cover on the road in Starkville.
I think Mississippi State's offensive explosion against Georgia has to be in part due to some of the surprise factor, and that means that we're not going to have any surprise going up against this Texas A&M defense. Mike Elko has seen the tape now. He knows how they're going to react. I think Texas A&M's defense is the best unit on the field for either team, and so that's why I'm going to go with the Mississippi State team total under 19.5, riding with Nick Scorton and the rest of these Aggies defense.
Okay, elsewhere in the SEC, Tennessee. It is a, I use this term too much, tricky spot. It's a real tricky spot for LSU on the road at Arkansas. Sam Pittman and the guys coming off a bye after they just beat Tennessee. They're 2-1 in the SEC, Danny.
They are. I think there's a bunch of teams in the SEC which are just a bunch of teams. They're just a bunch of good, solid teams, but they're not playoff caliber teams, and that's how I described LSU. That being said, I think Arkansas is right there on the same level with them. We already saw them beat Tennessee. They've been a tough out all season long. Taylon Green is starting to play pretty comfortably within Bobby Petrino's system, and the defense has really been the story here. So I think it could be a long day for Garrett Nussmeier and company. I think Arkansas covers, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game outright either.
LSU is not a disciplined or consistent football team, and therefore it is very, very tough for me to be able to trust them to go to a place where Arkansas has already shown the ability to put together the proper game plan to limit an opponent and build up that kind of energy and that kind of confidence on that sideline in that stadium to pull off the win. I absolutely think this sets up well. It almost feels too easy, but yeah, I'm going to take Arkansas here again. I just don't think that LSU has been strong enough to be able to follow up that massive overtime win against the Rebels. And yes, I agree, Chris, a tricky spot.
So it might be the number 8 team in the country going down. How about the number 9 team in the country? Iowa State, 6-0 for the first time since the 30s. Chip, thanks in part to us because we gave them some much-needed fuel last week when we picked against them at West Virginia, and all they did was blow them out. What about this week against UCF?
Yeah, Iowa State does make, like, an 18-point win feel like a blowout because they squeeze the life out of you in the second half. Iowa State has been one of the best second-half teams in the entire country, but even more specifically than that, Iowa State has been one of the best fourth quarter teams in the entire country. The halftime adjustments that this group makes, especially on defense, are phenomenal. They are averaging 5.2 second half points allowed this season, exactly 2.6 per quarter. So I've got an advantageous line here. I'm going to go Iowa State in the fourth quarter minus 2.5 because the Cyclones close better than almost anybody in the country.
Yeah, but Iowa State has been soft. The wins have been fluky, and they don't look very tough. There you go. There's your clip. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. What they have been doing has been so awesome. UCF is searching for answers offensively, benching KJ Jefferson, making a change there. The offense has been sputtering. Iowa State's defense, really, to me, I knew what Rocco Beck would bring to the table, but the defense, to me, has been the surprise of the season. So I'll go ahead and take the under on the game. You mentioned it clamping down. I think they contain UCF's offense. I think it's a lower scoring game, so I'll take the under.
Cyclones allowing the fewest points per game through 6 games of any Big 12 team since Missouri in 2010, back when Missouri was in the Big 12. Also in the Big 12, if it's not Iowa State, BYU, maybe it's Kansas State. They suffered the 1 loss, but Avery Johnson and company have kind of got their skis underneath them a bit, and they're going to West Virginia, Danny, as a 3.5-point favorite.
I mean, Avery Johnson's out there taking selfies on the bench during the game. I mean, you might be feeling yourself, but you have to be playing really well, which he is doing. West Virginia let me down a little bit last week in that Iowa State spot. Thought they would play a little bit better defensively. I think Avery Johnson makes a lot more sense why they moved on from Will Howard, moved to this young, talented guy. I remember talking to Chris Kleiman earlier this season after he had that rough performance against BYU, said he could not wait to get back out on the field. That's the type of competitor he is. I think they really revolve around him and love what they're doing. So I'll say they go on the road and cover this small number.
Yeah, West Virginia's defense and the struggles that group has had is really where I start my handicap right here. And I was thinking about going with a little full game over, given the way that Garrett Green can play at his best and given what we've seen from Kansas State in terms of giving up explosive plays. But if I'm going to bet on anything, I'm going to bet on Kansas State fixing its defense before I'm going to bet on West Virginia to be able to come out there in a letdown spot and just run up the score as well. So let's go just with the Kansas State side of things. Kansas State team total over. I think we're getting that at 29.5. So I like that number. Anything under 31. Wildcats offense run the day.
Here's my best bet. Around 8:15 Eastern time, you're going to open up X and you're going to see photos circulating from the farm in Stanford. And it's going to say, oh, look at this. You got a top 25 team in town and nobody's in the stands
yes.
for Stanford hosting number 21 SMU. Dave.
That is the easiest prediction I think I've ever.
Every game.
Every game. It never fails. And that's why I actually like Stanford. That was one of the reasons why I'm going to take those points here. I've already seen SMU, who's been a great story, and they've been a surprise in the ACC. A lot of people did peg them to be the team that potentially could contend for the ACC championship. I was not one of them, but I also didn't know they were going to make the change at quarterback that Rhett Lashley did. And boy, has it paid dividends going to Kevin Jennings. But I've already seen SMU fans kind of making a case to bring College Game Day there to Dallas, and they're starting to look ahead a little bit. That concerns me some in this spot. I think they win, and Stanford's coming off a rough performance against Stanford. I think you get against Notre Dame last week. I think they'll bounce back, play a little bit better against SMU. SMU wins, but over that key 2-touchdown number, I'll take the home underdog.
I've got some concerns about Stanford's defense, not only just what they would face in general, but where they are in the schedule and the kind of grind that they've been through. Notre Dame ran the ball all up and down. You had to play Virginia Tech the week before that. Virginia Tech finding success offensively. Clemson was able to push you around as well. I just think they're starting to get worn down, and going up against an SMU team that's coming into this game rested, I think is a really bad matchup. So the best bet here is to go with that SMU offense against a worn down Stanford defense. Let's go SMU team total over 34.5.
Those are the best bets of the week in the ranked games in college football. Good luck to everybody. Our thanks to Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell. You can hear those guys on the Cover 3 podcast. Danny, do you remember what you guys talked about today?
Yeah, our Big Ten special show. And then, of course, tomorrow we have our big game breakdown.
Whoa.
So both of those you want to go download.
The last time I asked Danny what he talked about, he said, I have no idea.
A little bit of that.
I can't remember. It was an hour ago.